a webinar coming up in March, on March 26th. This one is going to be about mentoring and putting the success in succession planning, in being able to do that and moving forward. So, this is going to be a really great webinar coming up. If you are with us today, you're going to receive a copy of all the slides from today's webinar, as well as the fact that we are going to be sending you a special link where you can actually register for this particular webinar. Now, this is a special link. It's going to go out in a GoToMeeting link with you tomorrow. You'll receive it, and you'll be able to register right away for the March webinar. This link is not going to be available to the public until next month, so this is a special presentation just for those of you that are joining us today. And, if you want to view any of our previous webinars, or again, always be kept up to date about any of our upcoming webinars, be sure to always go to our website that is totally devoted to mentoring at mentoringtalent.com/webinars in doing that. Now, we also want to talk about some of the things that we do, some of our discussion groups and our social networks. We have our High Impact Mentoring LinkedIn group that we follow. It's a thought leaders club, and at this point in time we have got over 700 individuals that are a part of our High Impact Mentoring Thought Leaders Club. The slides from today are going to be made available later to members of our LinkedIn group. We encourage you to come and join our group. And, after this webinar, there's going to be a poll and there's going to be a discussion that will be going on that will be, again, for our High Impact Mentoring Thought Leaders Club group in doing this. So, again, we welcome you to join us. And as Blake said, this is National Mentoring Month. What a great way to kick off a year. And we do encourage you to visit our blog. We've been putting up different subjects every week for you to look at and discuss in going forward. So again, what a great month. So what I'd like to do just in the beginning is to start off and talk to you a little bit about who we are at Insala. What we really focus on is improving business performance by developing your talent, and we really look to provide solutions to help your employees grow and develop. We offer career development, mentoring, coaching, career transition, and alumni program solutions to help you do just that in moving forward. To tell you a little more about our specific high-impact mentoring solution, what we do is, first of all, we offer strategic consulting to organizations to really help you make sure that your mentoring program is going to be set up correctly, and making sure you don't fall into some of those, problem areas that can come up if you haven't got a good strategy and plan up front. What we also do is provide training for mentors, for mentees, managers and supervisors, and program administrators. We do this in workshops, we do it in webinars. What we do is we tailor how we present this to your organization and what works best for you. And then, of course, we have our software as a service technology, and this is exactly what an organization needs to ensure that their mentoring program doesn't become an administrative nightmare in what you're doing. And what this all does totally is to make sure that your mentoring program is going to be sustainable, not just today, tomorrow, but next year and years after as you move forward. Now, what you're going to learn today is kind of a combination of things. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of both mentoring and training. And we're going to actually take you through some, return on investments about doing mentoring and about training. We're going to take you through some best practices for how you supplement training with mentoring, and also some best practices of how you might substitute mentoring for training and doing that. And we're going to take you through and show you how this has happened with 3 organizations we've worked with in some case studies. Now, one of the things that I want to make clear to everybody is that we are not talking about doing away with all of your training programs that you have in place. But what we are talking about is making sure that you're making the most of the time and effort that people are putting into development opportunities, and how mentoring really can supplement that and in some ways substitute for some of the training that you are going through. So at this point in time, what I'd like to do is, Blake, can you take us through our first poll, please?
Absolutely. First poll is a question that we have for you. Please select from the list below what you have used to develop employees. Have you used training, mentoring, a combination of both training and mentoring, or neither? You don't use training or mentoring for development. We'll take a few moments to get your responses. Few more trickling in. Okay, we got a good response right here. All right, Judy, check this out. Looks like 33% use training and 66% use a combination of both training and mentoring, with a very small minority using neither. Nobody responded that they use only mentoring, though. Do you have any comments about that?
Absolutely, and I think that's great. That's the fact that 67% are using a combination of mentoring and training is really, really great. So we're going to talk more about that and hopefully, add to that as you're going forward. And then for those of you that are only using training, we want to try and give you maybe some tips on how that can go forward. So, all right,
great.
Finished with the poll. Okay, great. Okay, so what we want to talk about now are some of the pros and cons about mentoring versus training and going forward. So let's talk about training first. Now, here's some of the pros that we see having to do with why you want to do training in going forward. So one of those is that it's widely available for training for anything you want to learn. I mean, you can either get it through your organization, you can get it on, webinars, you can get it through looking up a class on the web. There's a multiplicity of ways in which you can actually get training on just about anything that you want to learn in going forward. In addition to that, normally there's some certifications that are available when you go through training and doing that, and they add to your credentials in what you're doing. Training gives you a track record of success. When individuals have been going through it and you've got good evaluations, you're going to see that track record of success. You also are able to provide pre and post assessments when you are going through your training programs and moving forward. In addition, normally your training is structured and it's consistent. And if it's created in-house, normally that can be duplicated, and that means there is a minimum expense to be able to do that. Now, some of the cons in doing that is sometimes it can be costly in terms of time and money, whether you produce it in-house or you're using a vendor. Now, normally it is more costly if you're using a vendor in doing that, but you also have to consider the fact that it also costs internal resource time to create a program in what you're going to be doing and to be able to facilitate it on an ongoing basis. Also, there can be travel costs that you might have to think about if it's only done in a workshop format in being able to do that. So, people have to travel to a location, whether it's people traveling there or the facilitator traveling to them and doing that. The other thing is, and more we're looking at multiple ways in which we conduct our training. So you might have some special technology requirements. If it's a webinar or it's a remote format in what you're doing, or even if you're in a classroom and you're using specific type of technology. So again, you've got to consider those technology requirements that you go through. Not all information is retained, and we're going to talk about this in more detail, but one of the things that we've all learned when you first learn about any kind of learning theory or anything going on, we've all heard that approximately 18 to 20% of what is learned in a particular classroom format, any kind of training or learning situation, is somewhere around 18 to 20%, and we've heard that for years. Well, there's an update to that. That update actually has been, it's a couple of years old already, but I think we all see it more and more. That 18% has dropped to 13% because we see people that are coming in and out of a training program. They're not there consistently the whole time. They've got their iPhone or their BlackBerry, or many times you see that they bring in their whole computer in what they're doing, and they're doing emails while you're getting in. So that's really knocking down that retention percentage in what you're doing. The other thing that happens is when you go to a training class, you obtain a lot of knowledge and information, but it may not be focused on how you specifically are going to be using that. So sometimes you get limited real-world experience of how that training or knowledge that you're receiving is being used. And sometimes it's more theoretical than practice because, again, in a training program, many times you've got a much larger audience, so you've got to look at it much more theoretical than specifically to every participant and how they would use it. So at this point in time, Blake, will you take us through our next poll?
My pleasure. For this poll question, what we're interested in is, in light of these pros and cons for training, which of the following reasons would you choose training as a development method rather than mentoring? Could it be that training is widely available for any of your learning needs? Are you looking for official certifications and assessments? Do you have a track record of success with training? Is the fact that it can be duplicated easily or that it can be outsourced? Please take a moment and fill this out. Got a good response rate. We're going to wait a few more seconds. A few more responses trickle in. Okay, great. Let's look at the results. 44% said that it's because of the wide availability of training for any of their learning needs. Almost 20% said it's for certifications and assessments. 11% said it's the track record of success they have with training. Almost a quarter said it's because it can be easily duplicated, and a small minority says it's because it can be outsourced. Judy, what do you think?
Okay, yeah. And we talked about this, in fact, when you actually look at the very first thing we talked about under the pros was the fact it's a wide availability for just about anything you want to be able to learn. And this is what most organizations are trying to provide to their employees and to the individuals in the organization is that wide availability. I also thought it was interesting that the certifications and specifically these can be very, very important in doing that, especially in specific organizations, professions, or industries in doing that. So what we're seeing here, I definitely would agree with as we're going forward.
Great.
Okay, now what we want to do is we want to talk about mentoring, and we want to talk about the pros and cons of mentoring in doing that. So one of the first things that we know is it's cost effective when you're using internal talent expertise. We believe mentoring is one of the most cost-effective tools that you can use because you are using your internal talent and to put together this knowledge. Now, there's the idea, though, is, and I'm sure all of you have heard about the 70-20-10 rule in doing this. And for those of you that haven't, basically this is a theory that came out of Covey's Center for Creative Leadership. And it really kind of said that individuals learn best on the job or when they've got practice or reinforcement. That's your 70% of the learning that takes place. 20% takes place as individuals are kind of getting coaching from individuals, and 10% from training classes in being able to do that. Now again, we're not saying you do it with your training classes, but it does reinforce really how people learn, and they need to be able to put things in practice to be able to reinforce the learning that they're getting. Information is provided in shorter segments, and when we think about the fact that that 18 to 20% retention is now down to 13, are you more interested in having the 13% retention for a 3-day class or 13% for maybe a 1 or 2 hour mentoring session in doing that? So people are getting pieces of information in kind of shorter segments when they're doing this with mentoring and doing that. Now, learning is normally more specific to the needs of the culture of the organization. So not only am I getting practical experience about how the learning that I receive and how to apply it in my particular job, but also I'm getting that, kind of twist to it that is a part of every organization's culture. So even if you have been trained and you've worked with other organizations, how something's specifically done within the organization you're in now might be just a little different. So again, you've got that twist, that nice twist that's specific to the organization's culture. And then, the mentee is able to learn from someone who's really had experience in doing this. So it's not just theory, but here's what it looks like when it's in a real world situation. And here's how I've experienced it, both the good and the bad, in doing that. Now, we also want to tell you about some of the cons that are with mentoring. Sometimes it can be difficult to actually be able to structure a mentoring program, and I should really say an effective mentoring program. You really need to be able to put a program together to make sure that it's going to be effective in what you're doing. In addition to that, if you don't have commitment from a mentor or a mentee about mentoring and about being a part of a mentoring partnership, learning just may not occur in what's going on. The other thing that we find is individuals that will put together a mentoring program, many times you can't find all the experts that you need. So what can happen is I, as a mentee, may be working with my mentor in one area, and I'm asking a question about something else. The mentor, that's not their area of expertise, but they give me an answer in what I'm doing, and because they're my mentor and I'm going to look at them to know most everything and agree with them, I might get some false information because the mentor isn't an expert in that area. Probably one of the most important things is it's not only to have a good, solid program, but you have got to have qualified mentors to meet a specific learning need. We define a mentor as an individual who's got knowledge or experience in a given area of expertise, who's willing and able to share that knowledge with another. And what qualifies them is that willing and able. Willing means they're making the commitment, and able means they actually have the skills, the relationship, the coaching, the communication, the interpersonal skills to be a good mentor. And that's part of what qualifies them and what they're doing. And in addition, it many times can be more difficult to measure the results of mentoring than it is very specifically from a pre or post in going through a training program. So Blake, once again, will you take us through our next poll?
I'd love to. For our third poll question, in light of the pros and cons for mentoring programs, we're interested in which of the following reasons you'd choose mentoring as a development method rather than training. Is it because it's cost effective? Are you finding that the information passed down is better retained by participants? Is it because the mentor shares their experience with the mentee? Do you use it to promote networking or other? And if you choose other, please do share with us your alternate reasons in the comments and chat box. Thank you. We've got a good number of responses in. Let's go ahead and take a look at the results. Okay, Judy, 7% said they use it because it's cost effective. 21% said the information is better retained. 60% use it because the mentor shares their experience with the mentee. 6% said it's to promote networking, and only 7% said other. And we haven't seen the elaborations on other yet, but we look forward to hearing more about that throughout the webinar. What do you think about that?
Actually, we're hoping that individuals will think more about that cost effective in the 7%. But I really like the fact that mentors sharing their experiences at 60%. And because that almost then begins to lead even to the information easier to retain at 21%, if you look at both of them being able to do that. Because it is, you know, when I'm actually working with someone and I'm hearing their experiences and they're, you know, sharing that with me, that really makes a big difference in what we're doing. So again, we want to bring up that cost effective if we can with individuals, but the fact that back in our very first poll of individuals that 67% that was a combination of both training and mentoring, I think we've got some really good information here. So thank you to all of you.
Good point. Thanks for that.
Okay, what we want to do now is kind of take you through a scenario and do kind of a cost analysis on what we're talking about here. So we've got this individual named John. He's a Dallas-based salesperson, and he's still a salesperson, but he's transitioned into a new role where he's selling a different product than he previously had been responsible for. Now, John needs to learn about the product and the markets and the organization's sales process, you know, about that product. And he's really got 3 different ways that he can do that. One is he can go to a 3-day training course that's in the headquarters in New York. He can be assigned a mentor who can teach John remotely over a 2-month period, or he can do a combination of both training and mentoring over this 2-month period. So let's kind of take you through a cost analysis of what that might look like. Now, the cost of a 3-day training course, you know, we're going to add all these things up. And first of all, we've got John's travel. He's got to go from Dallas to New York. And we're trying to make these conservative between airlines and hotels and food. And chances are in New York, he doesn't need a car. He needs taxi and cabs and doing that. So we rounded that off at about $1,200 for a 3-day trip. Now, we also know John makes about $78,000 a year in doing that. So what we've done is to divide that by 52 weeks and then divide that by 5 days. And what we find is that John's daily salary is normally about $300, or excuse me, about $500. And so for 3 days, we're calculating about $1,500 for John in being able to do that. And then the cost of the course is about $2,000. So you can tell by the calculator there, suddenly we're up to $4,700 that it has cost for John to get what he needs to go to this 3-day training course. So now another option was for John not to go to the training course, but to get involved totally in a mentoring program and have weekly meetings with his mentor for 2 months. Now, we're thinking in terms of the mentor's time in being able to do that, because they're going to be weekly for about an hour, could be every other week for 2 hours, but it's going to come out to about 8 hours over that 2-month period. So think in terms of the mentor's time, that's about 1 day, and this mentor is making about the same salary that John is. So that's $300. And then John's salary, again, as we talked about before, he makes approximately $300 in doing that. And the program administrator, there's got to be a cost in there for that. And so what you're looking at now is a cost of $700 in being able to do that. Big difference between $4,700 and $700. But, you know, let's be realistic. And we all know that there is certain knowledge and certain information that, you know, especially when it comes to selling a product, you need to get that from a training class in doing that. So, you know, this just total mentoring might not be the best advantage, but we want to think about it. So what if we do a combination of both, which is a lot of what you all were talking about, which is the 1-day training course, and then it's supported by having a mentor for 2 months. So if he's going through and he's doing training, again, we're cutting down now because his travel costs are only going to be for 1 day versus 3. His salary, again, and then the cost of the course, then about $1,000. So at this point in time, you're looking at right at about $1,900 to be able to do that, just for the course. And then we've got to add in the fact that if he meets with a mentor for 2 months, and again, we've got the mentor's time at $300, John's time at $300, and the program administrator still at $100. But now what we've got in looking at the training course and then supplementing that with mentoring at about $2,600. So you can begin to see that there are some differences here. If he only goes to a training course, and again, we've talked about, you know, some of the things that can be important, but is he going to get all the experiences and you know, real world information from that? And then mentoring is $700, but is he going to learn everything that he really needs in being able to do that just through mentoring for the product, the technical areas of the product, and so on? And so, you know, you're looking at also training supplemented with mentoring at $1,600. So look at some of the differences in what you're talking about there. And $4,700 training only, $700 mentoring only, but training supplemented with mentoring at $1,600 as we're going through and being able to do that. So, you know, when you think about some of the best practices on mentoring versus training and going through that, let's talk about this, looking at it again from a couple of different scenarios as we walk through. Now, if you're looking at supplementing training with mentoring, a couple of things you need to be able to do is, first of all, determine if mentoring is appropriate to supplement that. In other words, I just talked about the fact that sometimes, you know, you need that hands-on or the very specific technical training. I need to understand this part, this product, whatever it might be. So, you know, you need to think about, you know, is mentoring appropriate to do that? And then, again, we talk about these qualified mentors. You've got to make sure you've got good qualified mentors to be able to do this. And then, you know, you got to think about, when are these partnerships going to begin? They need to begin as soon after the training takes place as possible, because that's going to be your best reinforcement. I've now taken what I learned and the knowledge and information from the training course, and now I'm going to have a mentor and put it into real world situations. So make sure that you understand what the timing of that is in doing that. And then, you know, what you might want to do also is to take an assessment at the end of the training course, so that you are very specifically focusing in on what the mentee needs. One of the things that we find many times is just as an example, I'm learning 5 things in my training course. And you know, 3 of them I got down pat, no problem. But these other 2, those are the real things that I need help from a mentor on. So again, possibly having an assessment at the end so you really can focus in on exactly what the mentee needs to learn in doing this and taking it forward. And then you want to assess the mentee again after the partnership to actually, you know, see that learning has taken place and there actually is performance that's taken place afterwards. So you still want to be able to do some evaluations at the end. Now, if you're looking at a situation where mentoring is substituted for training and doing that, here's some other things you want to make sure you're able to do. First of all, determine if mentoring is going to meet the goals and objectives of what you've set up. Again, very similar to what we talked about, you know, if you are supplementing. So, you know, is mentoring even a good answer? And then what you've got to do, because we talked about the fact that the mentors, the mentees, and also these managers and leadership, everybody needs to be committed that mentoring is a good, sound practice for development. So you've got to win the hearts and minds of all these individuals and make sure everybody is on board and, you know, understands their roles. You've got to be able to have a program in place. You've got to have a structure and, you know, a process in place, and, you know, how to identify those learning goals for the partnership in doing that. Again, you've got to confirm you got qualified mentors in being able to do that. Not just individuals that are good at doing something, but individuals that are not only good and have an area of expertise, but again, are willing, committed, and able, have the skills to be a mentor. You need to also ensure the mentors and mentees, again, are committed and everybody understands their roles in the partnership in being able to do that. There are so many historical misperceptions around what a mentor is, a mentee is, and what mentoring is, that you really have to make sure everybody understands what their role is in doing this. You've got to get managers support and have their understanding of their role in the partnership and what they need to do to really support that partnership and possibly let an individual take the time. It's kind of interesting, if you register for a training course, it's 3 days, and chances are you're going to get the time off from your manager. But sometimes it's a little different if you're asking for 2 hours a month to meet with your mentors. So you've really got to, work with the managers and get everybody to understand what their role is and the benefits of being able to do that. And then, again, assess the learning at the end of the partnership. So you really can go through and substitute mentoring for training. You really can go through and use mentoring as a supplement to training, but you need to make sure that you consider all of these things. So we're going to take you through a couple of case studies right now in doing that and show you how we've seen that work and, in very specific situations that we've been in. The first one that we're going to talk about was from a pharmaceutical company, hard to say, in doing that. And the issue here was they had an overloaded training staff in what they were doing. What the training staff was having to do was to onboard and train approximately 50 to 60 new hires every quarter in what they were doing. And this is a real situation. And the training staff was overloaded because of all these new hires, and they were getting feedback and information from satisfaction surveys that the existing employees were saying, hey, we're not getting the training that we need in what we're doing. So here is what we looked at. The verdict that we suggested to them was substitute mentoring for training and in some of these ongoing onboarding areas that they're looking at. In doing that. So a mentoring program was actually created to replace this onboarding training program. However, that brought up one more problem in doing that, because the training staff was concerned that people were feeling they weren't living up to their performance goals because they were shifting the onboarding from training that they would actually facilitate to mentoring and doing that. And they also wanted to make sure, and fighting the perception that mentoring was just nothing more than a quick fix to get them out of this situation of being overloaded. So, this was a real concern for them, and they're saying, what's going to be the perception of us if we then take this onboarding program and make it a part of a mentoring program versus what we've been doing previously. Well, here were the results. First of all, the success measurements indicated a much faster learning curve. In fact, what they do was that learning curve was accelerated by 5 weeks in what they were doing. Now, they found that it also was self-sustaining and in some ways self-perpetuating, because both mentors and mentees applied to be mentors in the next round. In fact, part of what we talk about in some of the best mentors are individuals who have been mentees. So all of a sudden you had a good crop of mentors for your next phase. The calls to the HR staff regarding information delivered during onboarding was reduced. We all know when you go through an onboarding program that there's a lot of information that's suddenly thrown at you, and you don't retain it all. So what happens is you keep calling the HR staff to be able to do that, versus working with your mentor, and you've got a specific question about something and they can help you with some of that in doing that. The managers and supervisors also were satisfied and impressed with the results, because they were finding that what was happening is that they were getting fewer questions, people are up to speed faster. You definitely can imagine that they were satisfied in doing that. And then the training staff, because some of the concerns they have, they began to realize that the satisfaction with this overall solution was much more important than sticking with some old-fashioned ideas that the training for this onboarding, or excuse me, the onboarding had to happen through a training class. So they were very, very happy. Now, another case study that we had, and this involved a technology company in doing this, and the average speed of getting somebody up to speed in the sales role in this particular technology company was 18 months to be able to do that. The organizational leadership and the direct line managers really wanted to accelerate this learning curve, and they were concerned about that this was giving their clients a bad perception of the company and its reputation, because what was happening is you had salespeople that were going out, they weren't getting up to speed fast enough, and they were always, you know, having to say, let me get back to you, or they're having to call their managers for, you know, clarifications. Some of these might have to happen right in a meeting that they were in. It didn't leave a real good impression of the organization during some of those meetings, because, you know, if you're the client and somebody's got to call up and something you think they should probably know, you begin to, you know, attach that to the reputation of the company in doing that. So what we decided and what we suggested they do was to supplement the training, because this was product, they still need to go to training, with mentoring in doing this. There was a mentoring program that was implemented to deliver on-the-job experience, and what it did was, again, supplement that classroom training that they got. It was a pilot. When we first did this, the first thing was a pilot. Not all the employees in a particular job role participated in the pilot, and here were the results. The employees who had the classroom training without this on-the-job mentoring had a slower learning curve than the employee who had the classroom training and the mentoring and being able to do this. Over time, the learning curve accelerated, and it went from 18 months, which was the original one, to 13 months. That's a 28% difference, and you can imagine what that means in dollars and cents to organizations. Now, the third case study we've got was an automobile manufacturer, and they had a limited training budget, because, you know, you can remember the times when, you know, those budgets, especially in this particular industry, were really cut back. But the employee population was growing, but the training budget remained the same. There was an increased quantity of training needs, but they also had the same internal resources to be able to create it and to be able to facilitate it in doing that. So what we suggested was that they supplement the training again with mentoring and being able to do that. Organizational leadership identified very specific development needs that they thought should be on the focus of what they were doing. And then the learning and development area determined the developmental activities that still needed to be a part of training, but those that could be accomplished with mentoring partnerships and what they were doing. So what you're saying is, again, if you've got what used to be a 3-day course, and you could say, okay, here's the most important things that need to be a part of the training program, and here's the things that can be a part of those mentoring partnerships. So what they were able to do then was be able to have crucial funding that was, you know, freed up to do all the things they wanted to do. So again, that quantity of training needs had grown, so they could then shift those and, you know, be able to concentrate on some crucial areas. And they found that, you know, it was a much more efficient and cost-effective use of their training budget and what they were doing. So I'm taking part of the money that I don't need for a 3-day class. It's now only for a 1-day class. I've got those dollars that I can use then for other areas in doing that. What they also found out is at the end of this, it wasn't just being able to have a more efficient budget in what they were doing, but all of a sudden at the end what they began to find out is individuals got more developmental hours in what they were doing, and definitely without any increase in the training cost and as they were going forward. So these are real organizations we worked with and done, and you can see how we were able to help them. So how can we help you? Well, first of all, what we can do is help you to evaluate what a structured mentoring program can achieve for your organization through a strategic planning program that we have called our Mentoring Readiness Program. In addition to that, we can help you determine how your organization can roll out mentoring as an effective talent development initiative. We can also help you implement that successful mentoring program using our overall solutions in strategic planning and training, and also make sure that you're going to achieve maximum return on investment to be able to demonstrate your results in doing that. So what we've talked about today is mentoring can be used to supplement or to be able to replace training. And mentoring, like training, should be formalized, it should be measured, and it should be tied to business objectives as you move forward. And we definitely feel that you make your mentoring program successful by defining and clarifying the purpose of what it is you want people to learn, the roles and responsibilities of everybody involved, provide with training, and make sure you've got backing on being able to do that. So at this point in time, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Blake. And Blake, what kind of questions have we got?
Well, we got a handful of some pretty good questions. Let's start last in, first out here. Can you go ahead and elaborate on some of the pros and cons of having a direct manager or supervisor serve as a mentor for their employees?
I have to tell you that I have never seen that work effectively in doing that, and I think that the manager definitely is involved in coaching with an employee, but a mentorship is a very different relationship in what you're doing. And many times what we have found is one of the great benefits of mentoring for a mentee can be it's a safe haven, it's a sounding board. They're able to learn and practice new things that they might not want to do right under the nose of the individual that's got their performance appraisal and their career in their hands. So I will tell you that after doing this for over 23 years, I have not seen a situation in which the managers are always the best mentors. They can be a good mentor to someone else, but it doesn't work very well to have a manager truly mentor and be in a mentoring partnership with someone that reports to them.
Great, thank you for that. Do you think there's any such thing as having too many mentees to a specific program, or perhaps what's the limit for a particular mentor?
There definitely can be something like that. I would say that I've seen mentors that can handle 3 mentees. I think the max really is closer to 2 in doing that. It doesn't always have to be one-on-one. It can, any given mentor can have 2. But here's what begins to happen. If you have a mentor that's got too many mentees, and part of what we really suggest you do is that each mentoring partnership should meet a minimum of 2 hours a month. If you can't meet at least 2 hours a month, you probably aren't going to get a whole lot out of it, either the mentor or the mentee, in doing this. So think about that. And think about the fact that, you start spreading yourself too thin as a mentor, and it's going to be the mentees that are going to start suffering in doing that. Now, that's a little different, though, than if you have a mentor who has several mentees and you're doing this in a team environment. But in that situation, the mentor is really meeting with several mentees that report to them all at one time. And usually in team or group environment, what you've got there is that the mentees also begin to help and mentor each other. But, my rule of thumb is definitely no more than 3, and I think 2 is really the optimal ideal.
Thank you so much. Let's see, how about this? What are some of the characteristics of an effective mentoring program?
There really are about 5 in doing that. And the first one really is you have got to tie your mentoring program to organizational objectives, and you've got to be able to measure results. We believe mentoring is a business strategy. It's not just a warm, fuzzy, feel-good program. Mentoring is a business strategy, and you need to position it as such, and that is by tying it to organizational objectives and measuring your results and what you're doing. In addition to that, we feel that there should be some kind of like a job description or role profile or whatever for the mentor and the mentee, so there's a real clear understanding in what everybody's doing. That the mentor understands what their role is, the mentee understands what their role is in what they're doing. The manager understands what their role is in supporting these and being able to do that. So everybody needs to understand their role. You know, you wouldn't ask anybody to take on a job inside your organization that they didn't know what they were going to be responsible for, and they weren't qualified or skilled to take on the role. So you need to do that. You also need to provide training for all the individuals that are going to be involved. Don't assume everybody understands not only how to be a mentor or a mentee, but how to be an effective mentor and mentee. One of the questions we many times get is, we believe that a mentoring partnership is mentee driven. And when we go through training or work with organizations on that, we hear many times from the mentees, you're right. I absolutely believe in that. I believe I should be the one that is driving the partnership. Can you tell me what that looks like? And, you know, because driving a partnership or being the driver means so many different things that many times individuals don't really understand what that is. And again, going back to a lot of the historical misperceptions around mentoring, you know, both the mentor and mentee need to have training. Don't forget your managers. Your managers need to have training and being able to do that. And then what you want to make sure is that you are able to track results. There should be some kind of technology that you can use to track your results, and again, keep this from becoming an administration nightmare. And I would say in the very beginning, before you even decide to roll out all of the steps that we just talked about, make sure there's a plan in place. Make sure you've got a good, solid, strategic plan on how to roll out and implement your mentoring program and how to do all of these things. Don't just jump in and say, well, we'll see how it goes. But what you need to do is have a good, solid, strategic plan as the forefront of all the other things that we talked about that will make an effective mentoring program.
You mentioned that it's important to train your mentors and your mentees. How much training effort actually goes into training someone to be a mentor if they actually have technical skills and expertise that you want them to pass down to mentees? It seems like this would depend on certain competencies that a mentor might already have. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yes, and that's a really good question in coming up. When we take mentors and mentees through training, it doesn't have anything to do with what they're going to be learning as they are, you know, moving forward with their mentoring partnership and getting the development they need. The mentoring that we're talking about and the training we're talking about for mentors and mentees is everybody understanding their role. So the mentor really understands when we say that it's mentee driven and it's mentor guided, they understand what that is. And they understand, again, you know, not just to be a mentor, but how to be a good mentor and how, you know, how to communicate, how to handle certain problems that may come up. Really understanding the fact that a mentoring partnership goes through several phases as throughout the length of the partnership, and really understanding the importance of coming to closure at the end, the kind of questions they want to ask and being able to do that. How they need to really work with the mentee and encouraging them around the goals and objectives. I'm not doing it for them, but really encouraging them on how this needs to happen. And it really is understanding that guiding role. And again, just because someone's good at what they do, just because they've got the expertise, doesn't mean they've got the communication skills, the interpersonal skills, the relationship skills to be able to transfer that knowledge to another, to be able to teach and transfer that knowledge to another individual, and being able to do that. And for them on the mentee side, and again, I just mentioned this earlier, that, you know, when we talk about the fact that the mentee should drive the mentoring partnership, they really don't understand many times what that is. So when we go through the training, what we do is to give them examples and say, here's what you're going to do. Here's what your mentor will see. Here's the behaviors that you're going to perform that can prove to your mentor you're driving this partnership as you go forward. And these are your responsibilities. And here's in various phases what you need to look out for. And here's the kind of things you need to talk about maybe in your first meeting. Here are the things you need to be prepared. And probably one of the biggest things that we teach both mentors and mentees is to create a type of agreement between themselves so that they really are making the most efficient use of the very precious time that they are spending together in doing that. So like I said, we're not talking mostly about what the expertise is that the mentor has that they'll be passing on, but more about how to implement that role as a mentor and then also as a mentee.
Looks like we're almost out of time. Do you have time for perhaps one more question, Judy?
Sure, absolutely.
This one was actually pretty astute. We had discussed the cost analysis difference between the methods of training and mentoring and how they synergistically can keep the cost of training down even when you supplement training with mentoring. We're curious about the return on investment part of when we talk about ROI. Members of leadership want to see the numbers not just in terms of saving money on the training, but they want to see how it overall returns these investments from the mentoring programs. How do you measure that?
Yeah, and quite honestly, I mentioned before that we believe mentoring is a business strategy, in doing that. So if it's a business strategy, you should be measuring it in what you're doing. And again, one of the measurements that we see many times is that, look what we've saved, in the training cost. But that, when you're thinking about the fact that people get up to speed, one of the example, the business case that we had talked about, which looked at being able to accelerate that learning and getting people up to speed faster. I've got training classes, I'm getting this, and then I'm getting practical application, which allows me to get up to speed faster in being able to do that. And I talked about the fact that accelerated learning that went from an 18-month to a 13-month and being able to do that. And that's a big savings. So, again, when you think in terms of, how much money are we saving through the mentoring, if you're getting people up to speed, you're getting them out, the sales are up in being able to do that, and you're getting them out on the street faster, and they're more knowledgeable when they're out there working with clients. So that's your reputation doing that. You can put that into dollars and cents. You can put that used to take 18 months, now only takes 13 months. You can take that 5-month savings and put it very specifically into dollars and cents as we go forward. That's just one way. And again, the savings on training cost, it can be, the fact that people aren't off the job. I haven't taken time off the job to go to a training class, so therefore, it's more time that I'm spending. It's not a cost of travel, all of those types of things. There's a lot of very different ways to be able to measure that, but it absolutely, you can look at that return on investment. First, what you have to do, though, is determine what specific business objectives do you want to tie your mentoring to. If you can figure that out, we can tell you and help you on how to be able to measure return on investment.
Judy, thank you so much for answering those questions. Looks like we're out of time for today's webinar. Do you have any comments before we part with our attendees?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for your attendance, and I want to remind you again that, the slides today are going to be available later to all of our members that are a part of our LinkedIn High Impact Mentoring Thought Leaders Group in being able to do that. And again, you are going to receive, for those of you that were attending today, you are going to receive the link right away to that mentoring and the success and succession planning. The webinar we're going to have on March 26th, you're going to be getting a link to that right away. And again, that's just for you because individuals that were not participating today won't get that link until next month and being able to do that. And also, you know, if you are a part of our High Impact Mentoring Thought Leaders Club, what we are also going to be doing right after this particular webinar is start a discussion. And there's going to be a poll, and we're really going to have a discussion so that, you know, we really can think about the types of things we talked today. Again, what it is taking and putting what you learn into practical application. And, you know, when you get a copy of the slides that you will receive tomorrow with the GoToMeeting link, again, you're going to get that ability to register for our next webinar in doing that. So thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you very much for some really great questions that we got today.
Thanks again to everyone for attending our webinar. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to email us at info@ensala.com. Thanks again for coming. Have a great day.